Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today
Good afternoon.
is a very important day where we speak on one of the issues bothering on humanity, specifically in vulnerable continents like Africa. Today, we have a session on food insecurity, and we have some invited guests here who are going to speak on various aspects of food insecurity. But before we move on, we are going to talk about one issue. We have a survey from the All Africa Students Union, which is the world's biggest student survey on sustainability. And it is a survey about research into students' attitudes and opinions towards sustainability, climate change, their education, and their jobs. And all university students can respond to this survey. So the link to the survey will be shown on the screen, https://bit.ly/worldwide student survey. So we entreat all university students, especially in Africa and of African descent, to do well to fill this survey for us. As we move on, I am first going to introduce our speakers for today. And I first call on, introduce Honorable Osei Nyakon, Kennedy Osei Nyakon. So Honorable Kennedy Osei Nyakon is the Deputy Minister for Agric in Ghana. He has a Master of Science in Climate Change and Sustainability Development and an Executive MBA in Project Management. He is a chartered marketer with 13 years experience and a former head of marketing at Zoom Lion Ghana Limited. In Parliament, he serves his second term and has been a member of the Committee on Local Government and the Select Committee on the Environment, a board member of the Ghana Standards Authority, and also on the Interministerial Committee of Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Development and Special Initiatives, and Ministry of Fisheries and Aquaculture. Next on our list is Dr. Silke Stoiber. Dr. Stoiber is an agri-economist and rural development specialist. She has 30 years of professional experience in international cooperation and lived more than 12 years in Southeast Asia. In Sub-Saharan Africa, she's visited Kenya several times and worked for several organizations such as CARE International, the UN World Food Programme, German Development Corporation, Welthungerhilfe, and Helvetas, among others. Her motto of work is be a practitioner in research and a researcher in practice. Since 2013, Dr. Stoiber works at the Center for Rural Development at the Humboldt Universität of Berlin and researches on food security and climate change adaptation and participatory research methods. She's into solution-oriented and focuses on real-world problems such as food and nutrition security, livelihoods of small-scale family farms, social inclusion and ecological sustainability, and climate change. Again, we also have Dr. Patience Atichogbe. Dr. Atichogbe is a nutritionist, and a research fellow at the Department of Nutrition and Food Science at the University of Ghana. Specifically, she studies maternal and child health and climate change and food nutrition security. Also, we have Miss Ashley Wanjiru. Ashley is an award-winning young champion of change, passionate about improving social conditions, sustainable policies, and contributing to non-Western centric analysis born from a diverse experience both within the UK and Kenya. She has expert negotiation and organization skills, fostered by active involvement in shaping policies and procedures for human rights organizations, including Coventry University, UK, and establishing a charity in Kenya combating female genital mutilation and early marriages. Ashley is an articulate communicator who is passionate about mobilizing youth to build and embrace sustainable and progressive futures. Experienced as an international conference president and a range of operations delivery in consultancy and NGOs. She was the first female president of Warwick University, Warwick America Summit, and in the same year became the youth program coordinator of the End Female Genital Mutilation Program at Coventry Haven, collaborating with over 500 young people, refugees, professionals, and the West Midland Police. She is a qualified lawyer from the University of Warwick School of Law, currently pursuing a Master of Arts in International Political Economy and incoming PhD student at the same university. She focuses on political economy and is inspired by working at the Fort Hall School of Government, where she's contributed to political analysis and recurrently guest features on their primetime analysis. Next on our list is Mr. David Afre. Mr. David Kwesi Afre is a project management professional, currently serving as one of the 4 CSO representatives on the Stop TB Partnership, Ghana's National Executive Board since 2015. He also serves as the chairman of the board since 2017. He works as the founder and executive director of the NGO Omega Project Management Foundation since 2008. He has a vast experience as a social entrepreneur and consultant in tuberculosis, HIV, and malaria project design and implementation. Over the years, he has provided fund mobilization technical support to over 100 civil society organizations and support groups of PLHIV, the private sector in workplace policies and local government departments, in design and implementation between 2005 and 2019. Among others, he is the board chairman for the Pan-African Treatment Access Movement and currently a member of the Ghana Country Coordinating Mechanism, a member of the Ghana TB Advisory Board, a member of the TB HIV Concept Note Writing Team of the Global Fund NFM 3 of 2021 to 2023, and the chairman of the Scientific Advisory Committee for the conduct of TB National Stigma Index Societies. Also, we have Miss Hannah Graham. Hannah is the advocacy management of the Girl Power Nutrition Program at the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, funded by Nutrition International through Global Affairs Canada. The program promotes girl-led change through education on the importance of a balanced diet and enabling girls to be agents of change at local, national, and global levels in the fight to stop malnutrition, continue from one generation through the next to the other. And she comes on the set with 2 people she works with. Fehizoro ni Fitiavana Rakotomalala. Fehizoro is a 20-year-old girl power nutrition advocacy champion, part of Scotisma Zazavari Malagasy, the Federation of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts in Madagascar. Fehizoro is based in the country's capital and an avid campaigner for improved adolescent nutrition. She was selected as a delegate on behalf of the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts to the Commission on the Status of Women that was postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic earlier this year. Also on this set, we have Valentin Masereka. Valentin Masereka is a 20-year-old girl power nutrition advocacy, part of the Tanzania Girl Guides Association. She's based in the Tanga region of Tanzania and is an outspoken activist on nutrition. She delivers nutrition education workshops and health checkups in her community and features regularly in local and national media in Tanzania. So we thank our speakers once again for making this time to speak to us on food insecurity. At this point, I'll introduce myself. I'm Henry Reynolds Nana Benyin, a research assistant and PhD student at the Felix Bloch Institute of Solid State Physics at the Leipzig University, Germany. I study the fundamentals of fluid behavior in narrow and tiny pores to understand the structural properties of various materials and confinements. Agricultural application of my work includes food preservation and protection of food crops from harsh climatic conditions. I have served in various leadership positions in the Ghana Engineering Students Association and the National Union of Ghana Students, and also the Society of Petroleum Engineers. A Lindau Nobel Laureate Meeting alumnus, a Tony Elumelu Foundation participant, and a Climate Launch Pad participant. And I'm pleased to be the moderator for this session. So thank you very much. And thank you to our audience who are listening and watching to us at this material time. So we'll move straight to the agenda for today. Africa is a continent of contrasts, many believe. With huge tracts of uncultivated land and forests, the continent imports $35 billion worth of food, estimated to rise to $110 billion by 2025. Also, food production in the rural areas is threatened by climate change and limited variety, causing prevalent undernourishment, especially among children. On the other hand, modern eating habits are creeping their way into African cities, resulting in an ever-growing number of heavily overweight people with same lifestyle diseases as in Europe and the United States of America. Africa's population is expected to double from 1.33 billion as of today to 2.5 billion by 2050. And one subject least talked about is food security now and for the future. So we have some few questions we may want to ask ourselves. Will there be enough land, water, and food variety to meet the demands of the growing African population? How will climate change affect the already worsening volumes of food produced to meet the continent's demand? Should Africa go free trade or fair trade in ensuring sustainable access to abundant, cheap, and nutritious food to be self-reliant? These and other questions our panelists, all speakers, will provide responses to. So we are first going to start with a general question to all our speakers. So the first question: droughts, conflicts, and population growth are underlying causes of food insecurity. Pandemics such as the current COVID-19 may lead to food insecurity on the continent. How has the coronavirus impacted access to sufficient, affordable, and nutritious food in Africa? And what is the outlook? Is the worst to be expected? So we take our turns. We first start with Dr. Steiber to share your opinion on this particular question. Yes, Dr. Steiber.
Yes. Hello, good afternoon, and thank you, Henry, for introducing me. Related to this question, I would like to give you a short answer, but it is very difficult because the picture is quite complex, as you mentioned. I would say in this crisis, we see that particularly the vulnerable and the poor suffer most. And I think, again, as usually in crisis, maybe here we can see particularly from countries that are not really, that have maybe a little bit neglected healthy local food system to build up a good rural-urban linkages. And also maybe countries that have pushed for a very strict and maybe even hastily implemented lockdown is also quite tough, I think. Why? Because of course, in a crisis, the food supply chains break up. And we, as you know, maybe that's was the reason I was invited. We have started a COVID monitoring project, which was initiated by an urban farmer from Cape Town, South Africa. And this lady, Mrs. Normonde, said she requested our center at Humboldt, maybe we should do something about, we do not want only to be numbers in this crisis, we want to show our story. So we monitor this process, and since the last month in April, and it was quite clear that the majority of smallholder farmers we include in our online survey, only small-scale farmers, they say their eating habits have changed. Their eating, most of them have changed. And in Maputo, for example, 90% said they have changed. The urban farmers farming in the green belt of Maputo still have all access to their farms, but they, of course, suffer from price hikes for imported food. In South Africa, in Cape Town, and also in Masvingo, Zimbabwe, these urban farmers, they're very small and they don't have an access anymore to their farms. And there is a problem that because in South Africa, Cape Town, they do not get a permit. They may be too small to get this permit, and it's cumbersome to get it in this crisis. And here, many people also talk about price hikes for actually all kinds of foods, even though South Africa produce also a lot of food, no? But there is a price hike. And what is most striking, and I would like to conclude, what I don't see there is a threat, is in countries where people fighting about food parcels on the one hand, and on the other hand, because farmers may not be able to go to their farms, the spinach is rotting on the field. So if there is food available but no access, I think there is not a good situation. Thank you. I think my time is over.
Yes, so thank you very much, Dr. Stoiber. We will want to hear Mr. David Afre's response on this question. How is COVID-19 impacting food security in Africa? Should we expect the worst?
This is a question I have listened to any time you mention it. What should we expect the worst? It always tickles my mind. Look, let's take Ghana as a case study. In the 1960s, when the first president of Ghana, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, had taken the reign of governance, and we had a whole lot of silos. The focus of the government was to build a nation of food security. And every district you went, you had silos, you have storehouses that were meant to keep cocoa, keep just every food item that we can make sure that in times of pandemics like this, we are able to protect our people through ensuring good nutrition and availability and accessibility of food. In the 70s, we went into troubles of coup d'etat, a lot of governance unrest, and we ended up on Operation Feed Yourself, because then some level of drought and food insecurity arrived just because of the instability in the system of political governance. By the 79, we had the overriding coup d'etat that came, and we entered the 80s. History has brought itself. In the early 80s of 81, 82, 83, Ghana went through serious famine period, where if anybody can remember history, that was a time some of us were very young, and I could remember the former president, Jerry John Rawlings, then a military governor, had to introduce the price control system where the rich were hoarding food and they had to take food from the rich and ensure the poor are having food to eat, and so on and so forth. 40 years down the line, yes, we have COVID, and it looks like history is going to repeat itself now, not because of political unrest, but maybe because of lack of governance and focus. As we speak, silos that were built are now closed down. We don't have food security in the country. As we speak in Ghana, food prices have already gone up. Prices of just everything have gone up. And the story is the same everywhere in Africa. It looks like the worst is yet to happen in this pandemic. If this proceeds for further 6 months in Ghana, in West Africa especially, there's going to be the worst. But I don't see any part of West Africa where food is being stored that can be distributed to the households for even a week. And therefore, we need to expect the worst which is about to happen. As for it's already said, and everybody is aware that the food chain system is already broken down, and if care is not taking the devastating effect of this, it's going to be beyond we can contain. Maybe this will be my initial response to your question, so we can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. David Afre. The worst is yet to happen. Honorable Kennedy Osenyako, do you share in his view? Recently, we were told that food prices have spiked, or inflation of about 10% has occurred on food prices. Do you share in Mr. Afre's view that the worst is yet to occur?
Thank you, Henry, for such a great opportunity to be part of this seminar. I think I've seen great minds also on the same platform to also share their views or their experiences in the area of food insecurity. Well, I may tend to agree in some part of some of the comments made by my colleagues, my earlier colleagues who have spoken. But I don't want the picture to be looked like we are painting a glooming picture for Africa. Well, we all know that Africa as a continent holds almost about 60% of the world arable lands. So when we are talking about fertile land that we can use to produce food, Africa can produce food to feed the entire world population. But as we speak now, we are not taking, let's say, we are not leveraging on such a great opportunity. We are just underutilizing this great opportunity that we have. We are not even cultivating or planting on more than a quarter of the land that we have. If you are to constitute or just do a simple mathematics to see what we are producing and the amount that we are spending in importing food from other parts of the world into Africa, like you rightly mentioned from your earlier remarks, that Africa is spending almost about $35 billion in importing foodstuffs from all over the world, and it is projected that it will even show up to about $110 billion in 2050. It is something that is very worrisome, because if you know how rich our land is, that you can plant anything, I will still go through this kind of problem. We in Africa have been battling with so many issues. Like you said, drought, conflict, and population growth. These have been a key issue that we have been battling with in terms of even food, how to take care of our people have enough food to feed our people, and even store some for maybe any future emergencies. This has been a very, let's say, problem that we've been facing as a continent. We only wake up to also come and hear about COVID-19, which has also come to compound the issue. Before COVID-19, prices looked to, even in Ghana here, prices of food items were very stable. And even Isoko, one of the major research institutions that look into food prices and prices of food items and all those things across Ghana, even projected or predicted a very slight decline of food items until this COVID came in. And you know what COVID is all about. COVID has come to derail all the successes or every plans of every nation. This is an unplanned something that has come. It's a global pandemic. Nobody has planned for it. It has come. But we need to deal with it. Where you see many countries have even closed their borders, it has made even international trade very difficult. If you meet or you encounter such situation, and you are to depend on the little that you have, then you can have just more people just chasing the fewer goods that we're having. So when a situation where demand cannot meet supply, where demand is more than supply, then definitely we are going to have this kind of situation where prices are just doubled. So I am not surprised that within the period of this pandemic, especially when the lockdown was even announced in most of African countries, prices of foodstuff just skyrocketed. It is a situation that we have to deal with. That how do we deal with such situation if this pandemic should even persist, or let's say live for a very long time? How are we going to deal with it as an African continent? It's a very critical issue that we have to look at it as a continent. And this problem is not for African alone, because if we are the food basket for the world, if we have the major lands that we can do and feed everybody around the world, then what it means is that Africans should not be, I mean, let's say, oh, Africans have been left alone, they should deal with their own issue. It's a global issue. It's a global matter that the world has to turn their attention to Africa, that if you have the fertile land that we can use to produce enough food to feed the world, then why don't you bring the necessary investment and the technology that we need in Africa to support? And when we decided to say that let's shift everything to the Africans to think on their own, we would produce to feed what we can eat today, but it will be very difficult to even support the other part of the world where they don't have that kind of land to even produce. So I think it is something that we have to look at it. It shouldn't be an African continent problem, but it should be a global issue that all of us should bring our minds and everything on board to discuss how do we deal with the issue. Because Africa has the resources. Africa has the youngest population around the globe. Yeah. We have the youngest population. So if we have the youngest population plus the most arable land, we have the greatest arable land in the world. Population, youngest population, and the fertile land. It's a great resources that we can capitalize, we can leverage on it. And it shouldn't be African problems, because if you are looking at the population of Africa and the entire world, if you minus what the population, we have about 1.3 plus billion. Currently, it's projected to rise to about 2.5 billion by 2050, okay? And the world population is also projected to grow by almost 9.8 billion 2050. How are we going to feed this world population if Africa holds 60% of the arable land that we can produce enough feed? So until the entire world come to a drawing board for us to judge and say that it's not an African problem, but it's a problem of the world, and that we need to support, bring the technology that we have. Because in Africa here, even in terms of food production, we only rely on rain-fed. How many of our land are irrigated in Africa? We are not like the Europe and the Asia and other parts. We are just depending on rain-fed because we don't have the kind of investment to even go into that kind of irrigation that we need, which will assure us all year production. So I think these are critical matters that will afford all the speakers the opportunity for us to deliberate on it and take a position or come to a conclusion, so that we'll take it from there. So that will be my initial remarks.
Okay, so thank you very much, Honorable Nyako. So the same question goes to Hannah Graham. How is COVID-19 impacting food security? And what is the outlook?
Oh, hi, thanks Henry for introducing me. Hello everybody, my name is Hannah Graham. I work at the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, which is the largest voluntary movement dedicated to girls and young women in the world. We work with over 10 million girls in over 150 countries around the world, and I'm pleased to be joined by Valentine and Faizo today as well. So I'm advocacy manager for the Girl Powered Nutrition Programme. We work with member organisations in Tanzania, Madagascar, Sri Lanka and the Philippines. Funded by Nutrition International, the programme first enables girls to learn about healthy eating and its effects through non-formal education, so fun and practical activities, and they receive a badge for their efforts. And the programme then encourages girls to identify issues in their local communities and take action on these issues through community projects, and empowers them to speak out about the many injustices around malnutrition through advocacy campaigns on local, national and global levels. Now, at WAGS, we know that girls are disproportionately affected by malnutrition. Gender equality can be a cause as well as an effect of malnutrition. And currently, girls are more likely to suffer from nutritional deficiencies than boys are for reasons including reproductive biology, low social status, poverty, a lack of education, for example, and even socio-cultural traditions and disparities in households as well. And improving nutrition early on, we know that, you know, it helps girls and young women to reach their full potential and break down the intergenerational cycle of malnutrition. And while women and girls are disproportionately affected, they're also the critical actors to finding lasting solutions. But there's little disaggregated data about the progress being made on improving the nutritional outcomes of girls. So malnutrition in young women and girls is absolutely amplified by this pandemic, which will have long-lasting effects on healthcare, economies and food systems. We've long understood that undernutrition compromises immune systems, making bodies more vulnerable to virus attacks and communicable diseases and less able to recover from sickness. And in several countries, we've had reports that obviously imports and exports have stopped, leaving many unable to afford the rising cost of purchasing food or access to nutritious food at all. Young women are often the last to eat in their families and eat the smallest portions due to cultures and gender norms, even less in terms of crisis. With a global food shortage, young women and girls will be eating smaller portions less regularly. With more young girls in lockdown at home, there's also the risk of domestic violence, abuse, mental, physical health problems, economic stress on families due to the outbreak can put girls at greater risk of exploitation, child labour, gender-based violence. We've had reports that young women are at risk of early arranged marriage in return for money and food supplies in their countries. And when families are facing food poverty, it's often the girls who are neglected. So the worst is yet to come. You know, if we don't ensure that nutrition remains a top priority in health systems, applying a gendered lens to the COVID-19 response and ensuring everybody has access to safe and accessible and sufficient nutritious food, particularly in those vulnerable groups, we're not just on the verge of a health crisis, but a global food crisis too. And this is just like a snapshot of some of the issues that we're hearing from girls and member organisations. But I'd now like to introduce Valentine and Faizo, who are our girl-powered nutrition advocacy champions from Tanzania and Madagascar. You know, to say a few words, and later on during the questions we'll hear from them. They're going to talk about their experiences, how COVID-19 is affecting girls' nutrition, and what roles girls can take in tackling malnutrition in their countries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Graham. And it's nice seeing Valentine and Fehizoro online. So the next few questions, they are going to be responsible for them. But again, on the same question, we asked Dr. Atichogbe what her views are on the impact of COVID-19 on food security and the outlook of food security after the pandemic. Dr. Atichogbe.
Hello, Henry. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, thanks for having me, Henry. Grateful to be part of the discussion. I think the speakers ahead of me has dealt with the subject in question, but I think this pandemic has actually exposed the weakness in African food system. True, Africa has about 60% of arable land, But unfortunately, majority of our food producers or farmers are small-scale agriculture people. And FAO said that about 75% of Africans are rural dwellers. When they dwell in rural areas, their livelihood are farming, fishing, and pastoral work. Now, this pandemic has brought about the weakness because already our structures that we put in place for the production, for distribution, for storage, and then making sure that the food gets to the consumer. And so that is the challenge we are having. And so when we are not having enough food to consume, and we can actually be talking about nutrition security. For now, there is also a report I saw from the global food crisis, which was released in April 2020. Yeah, they were saying that about 73 million people in Africa are already suffering from. We have 73 million of our people are food insecure already. And so this pandemic has actually made sure that we are not going to have food distribution open to everybody. You know, farmers are not going to be able to work because either they are sick or you are scared of going to the farm, plus the environmental factors that are not making it conducive for them to produce. We are in for a lot more of challenges. And so for now, I think the outlook is not looking too good, but it is not impossible. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Atichobe. So, our last speaker is going to speak on this particular question. Miss Ashley Mungai, what do you think about the impact of COVID-19 and what is the outlook?
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, as I mentioned, good afternoon, and thank you, Henry, so much for the gracious and amazing introduction. What I will say is that, as was mentioned in the introduction, I come from a slightly different perspective than a lot of the other amazing speakers on this platform, and my background is mainly from a legal and political standpoint. And that perspective, I'm going to try and hope to bring an alternative perspective and slightly maybe highlight some unpopular opinions. So firstly, I do acknowledge that Africa as a whole will possibly be hit harder than most other regions because of the structural problems that we do have with the food supply chain system. And this will potentially be exacerbated because African governments do not have the financial firepower or the operational capability that developed countries have already deployed. But I do not believe that that means we're entirely hobbled. As policy responses around the world are showing, what was previously thought to be impossible, too expensive, or too complex is actually doable. The same applies to Africa. To make it through the crisis, we must abandon the art of possible and attempt the impossible. In my view, the crisis presents critical obligations to African policymakers that we must be bold and creative to save lives and livelihoods and possibly the state itself. This crisis also presents policymakers with an opportunity to redefine what policy in Africa can actually do, particularly when it comes to health, wealth, and well-being of its people who are at the center, and in particular to regards to this food security issue. But that said, I do acknowledge the statistics that are around, such as what the World Bank predicts that the continent could lose between $37 billion and $79 billion in output and faces a recession of a negative 5.1%. Furthermore, agricultural production, which my counterparts have already highlighted is key within the region, is the most important sector in terms of output and employment on our continent. This could actually contract between 2.6% and 7%. This would be an economic disaster for the continent. The formal sector will be defined by the falls in productivity, revenues, and severe job losses. In the informal sector, which accounts for approximately about 8 to 9% of employment on the continent, its traders, farmers, vendors, MSMEs, tradespeople who rely on daily incomes are facing disaster if these economies are disrupted as they currently are, because we must acknowledge that the majority of our continent actually belongs to the hand-to-mouth economy, where if I don't work, I don't eat. And that's quite unfortunate. And whereas previously we've been able to rely on international support, whether that is financially or technically, from the traditional donor and development aid community, this will not be possibly as forthcoming due to the nature of this crisis having had a global effect. And most of the donor nations that we often rely to are some of the hardest hit economies in this crisis. Therefore, as Africa, we cannot rely on the international community and must look to seeing how we can sustain ourselves. Therefore, my line of thinking, and that I'd hope to articulate as this debate carries on, is how can we possibly see the corona pandemic not solely as a crisis, but also choose to see it and manifest an anti-fragile response and utilize the crisis possibly as an opportunity, something I hope to highlight later on. But I do acknowledge that there are millions of people already who are hard hit and cannot feed themselves. And therefore, I would propose initially that to start with a quick fix, and I say quick fix in quotes, saying that something that we can do to mitigate the impacts immediately as we start to think about long-term solutions is a solution that is equally big, simple, and fast. One solution that I would propose that encapsulates all three is cash transfers. Give the vulnerable population money and trust them to know how best to use it. Cash transfers are effective and people are rarely irresponsible with them.
Hey, Miss Mungai, thank you very much. I think we will want to hold on to your suggestions. You'll expand on them in your next question. Yes. So thank you very much. We move to our next round where we have some specific questions to our panelists. So we first ask the Deputy Minister for the Ministry of Food and Agric of Ghana, Honorable Kennedy Osei-Nyarko. How can governments prepare to mitigate food insecurity in the face of a looming population boom, pockets of conflicts on the continent, and even the current COVID-19 pandemic? Are there strategies being adopted by the government of Ghana that you would want to share with us?
Well, thank you, Henry. Government of Ghana is doing a lot to make sure that the populace don't go through a lot of difficulties at this difficult moment that the globe or the entire world is faced with this pandemic. Government is doing a lot to ensure that especially Ghanaians have enough food to eat and go about their duty, their normal duty, in a safety manner. And there have been a lot of strategies in response to this that government has put in place. And I can share a few of the strategies that government, you know how contagious this pandemic is all about. So government of Ghana have taken it upon itself to make sure that those frontline workers in the field of agric or food production are supported with enough PPEs, because if going to produce food for the rest of the populace, if we don't provide you the necessary in terms of protection, so that when you go and produce, nothing happens to you. Many people will just neglect the farms. So government says, I am not going to sit down whilst those who can go to the farm to produce for us, because they don't have any support of in terms of PPEs, to go about their normal duties, to stop food production. So government is doing everything possible. I can tell you government has given a huge project, or let's say a contract to local producers in terms of PPEs to produce enough PPEs so that we can supply to a lot of people. My ministry, as the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, has been mandated to ensure that those frontline workers in the agri field are protected enough. So this is one of the major steps or strategies that we are doing. And also, government says that this is the moment that we need to provide farmers with a lot of, let's say, technical support and in terms of machinery to make sure that they are able to go to their farm, plow the farm, plant it, and all. How are you going to do it? As I speak to you, government has acquired a lot of handheld equipment, planting equipment,
combined harvests to support the farmers, because we need a lot of food at this moment. We need the farmers to go to the farm to produce enough food for us. And government say that if they cannot go, you know the situation in Africa here, when we are relying on the traditional method of agriculture, this cutlass and hoe method of agriculture. We cannot depend on cutlass and hoe method of agriculture in this 21st century to ensure that we are able to produce enough food for our people. So government say that let us come. If we want to modernize agriculture, then we need to support our farmers with modernized equipment. We need to support them with equipment that they can use to plow their farm, let's say plant their farm, and even in terms of during harvesting, they can use the same equipment to also harvest. So that is the focus of government. Government says that in the area of rice production, one of our major challenges as a country in Ghana is we spent a lot of money in importing rice into this country. We have a vast land that we can plant, we can grow, or whatever we want to eat. But here is the case that we spent last year, 2019. We spent almost about $1.37 billion importing rice. We have a large, a whole land that we can grow enough rice and eat it. Government said that I don't want to continue this kind, especially in the midst of this pandemic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I increase supply of input such as seed, fertilizers, and pesticide to farmers at a subsidized rate to farmers so that they can go and grow this kind of foodstuffs or crops so that we can have enough to eat and even have surpluses to either to keep it in our warehouses or even sell some to our neighboring countries. The fourth strategy government is doing is that we cannot just produce. We all know, even in Ghana here, it is estimated that 40% of the food that we produce go into waste. It got rotten. They are left in farms because we cannot convey it to the market centers. One is a poor road. We cannot have good access to even convey those food stuffs to the market. Two, we don't have, let's say, warehouses to even stock those food, or we don't have enough processing capacity to process those food items or to add value to those items. So government says that if we want to ensure that we have enough food to feed our people and even get some to stock it, then we need to make sure that we create access routes, make sure that all this road to the food basket areas, we tie it. Even if you cannot tie it, we just upgrade it to make sure that farmers can have access to transport their food item to market centers. Now, as I speak to you, government of Ghana have released millions of Ghana cedis to NAFO, that is National Food Buffer Stock Company. We call it buffer stock. And Ghana Commodity Exchange to make sure that they buy enough of the surpluses or the excesses in the system from the market. They mop it up and keep it. So that like we are facing now, where immediately the government decided to announce the lockdown, we realized that food prices just skyrocketed. This is the period if government have enough food stock in the warehouse, it would have released into the market. And as at the time that the announcement was made, we were having a little over 24,000 metric tons of variety of food crops in the market. Though that 24,000, even my constituency alone, it cannot reach us for a month. We consume all. And we are talking about a population of 30 million plus. So now government said that we cannot continue. So government is putting up a lot of warehouses. As I speak to you, this government under Nana Akufo-Addo has put up 80,000 metric tons, which we think even that one is too small because already we have 134,000 metric tons already that we came to meet, and we are adding 80,000 to it. It is even too small for us as a country to be able to deal with this pandemic. Should it go beyond our expectation, then we need to have not less than almost about 250,000 metric tons of capacity of warehouse to stock food, all varieties. So government says that we need to encourage the private sectors to make sure they also come in. There are all silos which was built by Nkrumah and other things that we are rehabilitating it. So government projection at this period that we need to have not less than about 250,000 metric tons capacity of warehouses to stock food so that we can deal with this pandemic should it continue. And the last but one strategy government is saying that why don't we intensify youth employment in the agriculture sector? If we have a youthful, let's say, population, and this is the time that the old age, they are at risk and they cannot go to farm because the pandemic, we are told that even the old age, when they get it, I mean, the rate at which they are to, let's say, it can, let's say, kill them is very high. So if you have the younger age and we are not taking advantage of it, what will be the need? So let us take advantage of our younger age. And in taking the advantage of our younger age, it means we need to bring on board a lot of support to these younger people to go into this farm. So the government has put down several programs, youth in agriculture, and under youth in agriculture and my ministry. All that you need is, as a youth, identify the land that you have. The ministry has a program. We will come and just clear your land for you, support you in planting. We'll give you all the planting materials in terms of input, let's say seeds or fertilizer. And even during the harvesting period, we'll bring in machinery to harvest it for you. All you need to do is just to pay for those costs or expenditure that we have incurred, the government has incurred through the farm produce that you produce. So if you have about 1,000 acres of land, you have grown maize, or let's say rice, maybe the ministry say that having incurred the cost of maybe 1,000, which it will be equal to maybe about 10 bags of maize. So let me do all this for you. All this we are doing to just encourage the youth to also take the opportunity to go into agriculture, because we are faced with an unemployment issue in Africa where more people want to go and look for the white-collar job. But this is a green gold that we can also push our support our youth to go. So these are some of the strategies that government is putting in place to ensure that we are able to mitigate the impact of this COVID-19.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nyako. This is a green gold. But we have one question for Dr. Patience Atichogbe. How vital is nutrition when confronted with food scarcity? We know that we are talking about the abundance or scarcity of food. But on the other hand, food security involves the nutrition aspect. How vital is nutrition when confronted with food scarcity? Is it a clear case of nutrition versus adequacy? Which one should be pursued? Or are we able to do both? Dr. Atichogbe.
Thank you, Henry. Definitely, it is very important that we should do both because without the other, we cannot achieve the next one. Okay. If we want to achieve optimum health and grow and good growth, then it means that everybody must be nutrition secured. And when we talk about nutrition security, we are talking about everybody at all ages having access to obtain safe and nutritious food. And then this food obtained must be utilized. That is the consumptive part for it to be bioavailable for the body to use. Now, nutrition security is at the obtaining safe, nutritious, and adequate food all the time, all day, in all households. And then this food security is surrounded by 4 pillars: availability, accessibility, and the utilization of the food. But food security cannot be achieved. And so if we cannot achieve food security, it means that there is going to be malnutrition. Already, there is a joint report that has been released by WHO, UNICEF, and World Bank 2019, which said that about 39% of African children under 5 years are stunted. In actual figures, that means that we have about 58.8 million children, and then we have about 28% wasting. No, wasting connote immediate effects of malnutrition. You know, it means that the child is thin for their age. And when you are talking about stunting, we are talking about chronic hunger. It means that for a longer period of time, these kids were not food. And there are consequences to stunting, you know, like impaired cognitive development and physical development. And now this thing, when they are not broken, you know, it leads to generational cycle. You know, when a woman is stunted, definitely they are going to give birth to a minority children, you know, and the minority children who cannot think, who cannot do well in crime problem in the future, because it means that the human resource factor of nations are going to be affected economically. They are not going to be able to produce. You know, already in West Africa, the stunting rate is about 29%. Central Africa has about 32%. And Southern Africa also have about Central Africa, Southern Africa had about 29% also stunting. So these are very issues. So we need to actually marry the two. We need to look at the production. We need to look at the distribution. We need to look at the storage. We need to look at food being available at all, in all homes for everybody consume. Nutrition is very, very vital throughout the life cycle. From childhood, the best age for a child to have a good nutrition and live healthily is the first 1,000 days of the child's life. And then when you talk about women in reproductive age, very, very vital, because the woman who is actually anemic because of iron or vitamin A or iodine, you know, is going to have a low birth child, a low birth weight child. It can miscarriage, you can have stillbirth. And these are things that we need to look at. So nutrition is really vital, but as I said, we cannot achieve this when we have food scarcity. So it is important that we look at adequacy. That's my take for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atichobe. Yes, so you mentioned that nutrition is vital, especially for at the formative stages of the girl child, and also for women, especially during their pregnancy periods, to prevent low birth weight children. We now turn our attention to Hannah Graham, Fehizoro, and Valentine. So, in what ways do you presume the COVID-19 pandemic will affect the girl child in the area of nutrition? And what are the strategies that will help mitigate these impacts?
Okay, so I've talked a little bit about, you know, the issues affecting girls already, but at WAGS, it's really important to us that we work with and we're guided by girls and young women in our work. And we believe that girls and young women have the right to represent their own interests. So, you know, I'd like to hand over to Valentine and Fezo, advocacy champions, to talk about their own experiences in this. So, Valentine, would you like to go first?
Hello. Okay. My name is Valentine Muhindo, an advocacy champion on girl-powered nutrition from Tanzania. On response to this question that how coronavirus is affecting nutrition, especially for girls and young women, corona is like affecting very much the nutrition for girls and young women. As far as first, girls in our societies feed last, and now because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the provision of food has become like low. They don't get enough food in most of the societies, and as you see, girls, they feed last, so most of the time girls get the leftovers, and also some families are not able to access to balanced meal, as long as now the per capita income has become low and like the food prices has become high, and also the girls are not prioritized in terms of nutrition. So this is like affecting very much the nutrition of girls and young women in our society. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is Fehizoro going to respond? Fehizoro?
Yes, hello everyone. I am Facebook from Madagascar and I am an advocacy champion. So about that question, as always, as we know, even before the coronavirus pandemic affected all of Africa, Madagascar, but more specifically, most of the Madagascar people were already experiencing difficulties in accessing healthy food. But now I think it is getting worse because the coronavirus has been able to enormously affect the African continent by affecting in particular the quantity, the price, but above all the quality of the food caused mainly by the import ban. Like everyone in Africa, girls and young women suffer from increased malnutrition due to COVID-19. In Madagascar, even if the families receive aid from the government, this is insufficient for certain, and as it is up to the men to seek surplus money, it is they who are the most forward and who eats what is sufficient for them. And the women, and especially the least aged girls, eat the least, so they suffer from the lack of food. In addition, meats and proteins are more expensive than rice and vegetables. And the fact of that Malagasy are not in education of nutrition, instead they prefer to fill their stomach and not integrate the necessary and complete proportion useful for the nutrition of its impact. They also undergo the lack of nutritional contribution. So about the question of a role of girls, I think girls can take the lead, for example, for making a kitchen garden as they are on lockdown. But in the same time, they can also sensitize as well their community to do so. Or why not creating some challenges about nutrition? Um, Girls can take the leads in food transformation as well. As you know, that trading with other countries is not difficult. It's time to think local. I mean to promote local farmer with local trade, and girls have a capacity to do it. They have knowledge on this end, and supporting them in the path can be valuable for a better world for everyone to face this pandemic situation. As I am an advocacy champion within our association, I participate in a campaign which consists in feeding and raising awareness of decision makers so that girls can have access to healthy nutrition. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Valentine and Fehizoro. Yes, so thank you for updating us on the work you are doing for girls and women in your respective countries with regards to food nutrition and how to combat or mitigate the impacts from the current pandemic. So we move to one area, very important area, which is climate change. So this question goes to Dr. Zilke Sturba. In rural parts of sub-Saharan Africa, farming is threatened by climate change. How can rural farmers brace themselves for the devastating consequences of climate change post-COVID-19?
Yes, hello. I'm back, and actually I wanted to conclude before. Can you read that? Or is it just the opposite? Can you read that?
Yes.
What does it mean?
Small is beautiful, beauty is vulnerable, and
vulnerable. And the last one? The vulnerable. Most.
Most, yes.
Thank you. I would like to say, because as for the COVID-19, it is a health pandemic, and climate change is another wicked problem that is so complex and is also affecting the entire world, not only sub-Saharan Africa. Meaning also for the climate change issue, I think particularly the Dr. Patience mentioned, Africa particularly, the food is produced by millions of smallholders. And in fact, I see this also as a potential that the food calories in Africa compared to other parts of the world are produced by smallholder farmers, because that's why I frame it with this word, small is beautiful. It can be beautiful, but it can also be, it's also very vulnerable, and as beauty is vulnerable. And in terms of climate change, I think small-scale farmers should not be left alone. I mean, that is, it is nice to have good soil, as a honorable minister of Ghana said, and I agree, Africa's soils are also quite beauty, but also these are vulnerable if you just put in only too much chemical fertilizer, if you don't take care of the soil and so on. So, and secondly, if rainfall, which is now not so much more distributed like in the past, is maybe getting these new rainfall patterns with very strong dry periods, dry spells, flooding, the soil also suffers. So it means that there must be a rethinking on how to treat the soil. And by this rethinking, by agroecological practices, by climate friendly practices that are, for example, saving the water holding capacity, the small farmers often are a little bit overwhelmed by all this change of technology. Sometimes it's too complex. If I'm rain-fed farmer, how can I change to an irrigation system? I need a little bit bigger structure. So that's why I think adaptation, there's a big adaptation gap, of course, but there are also many potentials. And I've seen many farmers who really do very creative solutions. I think these solutions must be upscaled, must be helped by the policy also how to upscale them, because of the end of the day, if you maintain the potential of the healthy soils, if you maintain the potential of healthy plants, you will come up also with the healthy food to healthy people, what I put here in my conclusion for this second question. And one more issue is, I think, also the healthy market, because climate change adaptation means for me also that small-scale farmers get a better access to markets. We have seen from our research in Kenya that is sometimes quite difficult, fair contracts with supermarkets and so on. And if they sell on the local markets sometimes do not have the real good facilities for small-scale farmers to sell their products. And even sometimes perishable goods like the African indigenous vegetables, for example, they would also lose quality very easily by sitting in the sun for hours. There's no shadow, no marketplace with some water excess and so on. So I think local food systems, again, where consumers, producers can meet, can exchange on healthy food, would be a great chance also in the battle against the climate change. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much, Dr. Stoiber. So on the issue of climate change, we may come back, but then we have one question for Mr. David Afre. Regardless of the huge tracts of arable land in Africa, the continent still imports large quantities of food. We've known this from the conversation from previous speakers. In the aftermath of this current pandemic, do you see Africa picking itself up and leading its efforts in self-sufficiency, or the same old dependency on food imports is envisaged? Mr. Frere?
Yeah, trying to get my mic right. Forgive me.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much for this. I think this also gives us another level of exposition. But before I go to that, I just one comment that made me or tickled me was when my honorable minister mentioned that Africa is actually food basket of the world. And I was wondering if we still have such rhetorics that is making sense on the continent, especially when you cannot feed your people and yet you are made to believe that you are the food basket actually. And then you begin to wonder whether we really want to continue to go that way. We have the youngest population, we have the most available of arable land in the continent, and yet our people are not trained, our educational systems are not moving towards getting agriculture an attractive industry for the youth that we are training with the universities, the humanities and all of these that they teach them in the schools. They come out and they don't see the land as part of the books they have read. And so much is happening. I see. Also, when I listen to the conversation around what is happening in Africa and especially Ghana, looking at the projections my honorable minister have put to play, this actually exposes Africans' unpreparedness for any form of pandemic for poor people in the past, in the present, and in the near future, it might be worse. Yes, we need to pick up the pieces and run. It looks like there's a lot of hope, and Ghana needs to especially show a way, as the minister tried to speak good about it. We are expecting that governments will pick up the lessons, but the past is not helping. Or how will I put it? The present doesn't show that we have learned any lessons from the past. And this is where my fear is. You don't want to be a prophet of doom. You want to motivate policymakers. You want to ensure that the people have hope. And so you don't want to speak doom. But hey, all these things have to do with leadership. If leadership is not planning, if you fail to plan, you have virtually planned to fail. It is clear already that we need to strengthen our food production and supply management system. We need to control wastage in all the system. That includes families and hospitality industries. We need to go back to the silos for food conservation. We don't have a choice. Food security and nutrition needs to be introduced in our education systems. Look, whether we like it or not, government must take up a leadership role. Central government has the responsibility to develop better and decentralized food security policies. We need to have our local government systems across Africa to take control and implement such food security plans, looking at production, availability, accessibility, whatever you can think about food is critically important. Our government needs to sit down. It is no longer a talk show. This pandemic has come. Look, people living with HIV/AIDS in Ghana, the whole Africa has HIV pandemic. TB, tuberculosis control in Africa, very poor. More people die of malaria in Africa. More people die of TB in Africa. When you put this to malnutrition in Africa is high. It is not something that we need to take as a joke. This pandemic is only coming to put the media and discussions on the table because of the sufferings that people are going through. And then because the media is following from community to community, country to country, and showing what is happening elsewhere. We really need to make sure that we take the destiny of our people's nutritional values and food security into the hands of ourselves. Look, at this stage, I want to say something. Families must take their nutrition and food security into their own hands also and produce. I say something always, whether we like it or not, every household can become a vegetable pharmacy on its own. Look, back in the 80s and late 70s, where some military governments have to come and say, Operation Feed Yourself. Just every home was able to feed themselves because then they knew that there was no system called a buffer stock, or the silos were empty because they were never produced, they were never stocked, and therefore nothing for the people. And so when it is already raining and the roof is leaking and we have to find a way of patching it, it is difficult. It means the picture is not too clear. We are not likely to survive it very well. It means that the people living with HIV/AIDS will have problem with nutrition. People living with TB will have problem with nutrition. People with disability, look at the age from 70 going up. Children in the womb, mothers, children under 5, we are going to have problem with nutrition. So families need to begin to take their responsibilities. Government may not be able to give us a short-term answer, but whether we like it or not, the food is not even there. They are now thinking about stocking. So when we get it produced and stocked, when we are already faced with a pandemic that has started running for the past 3 months, we really need everybody to farm. Every home can become that pharmacy I'm talking about. We need to be careful about water. Now, there's one thing that I need to talk about, and that is to get every country to ensure that civil society is enlightened. We need to form strong civil society movement that can advocate for food security and nutrition in all countries in Africa, so that these civil society organizations can police their government to ensure we have the policies that the government puts in place going forward, implemented in a manner that you can predict every happening in the country. You can predict, you can use data to tell that, look, your country is secured or not secured. It is critically important. We have left the country food security and nutrition values to self-decisions of mothers and fathers who are actually poor and are not able to feed themselves. Look, one thing that I see that one speaker mentioned that I love is, if we don't take time, the next generation is in trouble. This is because they might not have even good nutrition at this stage. The first 1,000 days, like Madam said, if the children now born in this pandemic period are not able to get good nutrition, and you have about 1 million of these children born in this period, what that means is a good percentage of the people in the next generation are already not complete human beings that you will assume will think in the right forms and take the right decision for the following generations. And that means that we don't have a choice. We must take nutrition and food security as a serious business and begin to deal with it with all form of budget, with all form of development planning. Ensure we bring, look, it must be something that we must be interested in. Okay. Thank you so much for that.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. David Afre. While we still look at the solutions or possible mitigating measures, we want to ask Ms. Ashley Mungai how the youth of Africa can support the government, civil societies, and the private sector's efforts to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on food security and nutrition. But before that, we have a question from Mame Dada from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana. She wants Ms. Ashley to expand more on what she meant by a quick fix, since one of the major problems we face as a continent has been due to the quick fix methods that the African governments have implemented over the years. So Ashley, kindly respond to the quick fix comment and then tell us about how the youth can support government, civil society efforts in this regard.
Hello once again, and thank you for that question. Allow me to elaborate. I do fully agree that one of the biggest problems our continent faces sometimes is we rush to do answers and fix things, but we don't initiate long-term progress. And that's why my main key thing to arguing what we as the youth can do is actually innovate, innovate, innovate. However, before I elaborate on that, I will acknowledge that innovation, testing, and mass rollout does take time. And that's why I was signposting cash transfers as a quick mitigating initiative. And the reason why I say it as a quick mitigating initiative is that currently a lot of our population are faced with the question of, do I go out and fend for my family so that we can eat? And if we don't, we starve, or do I get corona? And to help people be able to actually adhere to measures of lockdown, that's why I was suggesting that we do something like mobile money transfers. And this is because these are already permanent across the continent, and it's possible to get the money where it needs to go, do it quickly, and it avoids the mess that we sometimes see with corruption and delays associated with government procurement. Finally, it puts the money where the economy actually needs it. It puts it in the hands of the consumer who buy their food and their other essentials from the informal economy, thus keeping those value chains alive. But allow me to start again and talk more about what are the solutions I think that we as the youth can do. I think as the youth, we need to recognize recognize our potential and our ability to manifest an anti-fragile response and utilize the crisis as an opportunity. And why do I keep saying as an opportunity? I want to signpost that, as some of us are aware, this is not the first health crisis that has caused a quarantine phase across the world. There was the Black Death, and there was also the SARS, and also as Africa, we have had pockets of quarantine across the continent due to Ebola. However, what is less talked about is how the Black Death and SARS both precipitated economic or cultural booms, such as in the Roaring Twenties in the US and the Renaissance period that came in the immediate effect in Europe. Therefore, demonstrating truly that we can choose to an extent how we respond to this crisis. Will we let it fully cripple us, or we use it as an opportunity to, one, renegotiate trade deals to a more favorable development perspective for us as Africans, and two, importantly, capacity build. I cannot stress this enough. I believe that the one thing that we as a youth can really help support the already initiatives of the government and also the private sector is to innovate, innovate, innovate. And why do I keep saying this? Is, for instance, one of the things that this crisis has showed us is that we have the capacity to do so. Two examples of that is, first, there's already a new booming youth-driven mass economy perpetuating across East and West Africa. We've also seen the capacity to innovate in infrastructure, and in the last 2 weeks of the academic, where, for example, in Kenya, through partnerships with private local entrepreneurs, they've been able to install disinfectant booths that take 12 people at a time to help the Likoni ferries carry on. And I believe this can also be utilized to help allow people to continue to do the necessary agriculture. The reason why I signpost this is that these two prototypes costed just $9,000 to have them made, installed, tested, and fabricated in just 4 days, showing that if we favor homegrown solutions, they are often also cheaper than international ones. In the health industry, I also signpost the developments that have been made by Senegal, whereby Senegal is currently making respiratory machines using 3D printers at the cost of $60 instead of $16,000, which was what was the proposed price from the US. Why do I signpost these again? These are examples of how we as a youth can do innovation and we can drive large-scale impact, which I believe can be the same innovation can be channeled into the agricultural sector and allow us to help us to create homegrown capabilities to allow for a sustainable and secure future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Ashley Mungai. Yes, so while we still look at solutions to this challenge, we want to go back to climate change. Honorable Kennedy Osei-Nyakun, our question to you is this. We have seen the devastation of farmlands in the arid regions of the Sahel. Climate change may pose similar threats to farms in sub-Saharan Africa. What should African governments do to stem the threats posed by climate change? Honorable Nyakun, please unmute your camera.
Okay. Yes, Henry, climate change has become like, let's say, an albatross around our neck as a people. And this has come as a result of our own action. These are anthropogenic issues, our own action that is affecting the environment. And as a result, the only way that we can mitigate this issue is to cut down or just avoid certain actions or activities that we have been doing to impact the environment. So if we are able to do away with some of these issues that we are doing as a people, which go in the long way to affect the very environment that we live in, then we'll be in a free world to live. But if we continue to exacerbate it, where we continue to do the own thing that we do, flare those, those who are producing oil and gases, continue to flare those gases in the air. Even those in agriculture, we know how they pollute the atmosphere with methanes and all those things. How do we come about ensuring smart agriculture, focusing on smart agriculture in not hurting our environment. And I'm so much in pain, especially those in the desert area. Already they are faced with a critical condition. So if their activities or their own actions are also going to, let's say, impact the already bad situation that they face it, then as a people, what we have to just come back, retreat, and say that how do we resolve this issue? And we can only do it. Well, adaptation is good, that we can adapt to certain situations, but it is more important to mitigate than, adapting to the situation. So we don't have to let the situation happen so that we can adapt to it. We should rather make sure that we mitigate it. And you know, even in Ghana here, look at how we are deforesting. People are cutting down our forests just to either plant cocoa or do whatever, going for mining and all those. In the long run, the effect of the action that we are all doing is to cause more harm into the environment. And in causing more harm, we know what will be the effects of the climate change. Now look at how flood is taking everywhere, almost destroying our lands and all those things. It did not happen one day. It is happening because of our own insensitive as a people on the planet. We are causing all this. This is not something from, let's say, it's from God or whatever it is. It is our own action. So until we decide to stop or do away with some of the actions that we are doing, which is affecting or impacting the environment, all these issues will be there. And if it becomes so weird, especially in Africa, and then we are doomed. Because already, even without this impact, if you look at how climate change has impacted even in the Western world, you cannot say that it's the same thing that is happening in Africa. Africa, let's say, we have been spared a little bit. But if we continue the activity that we are doing in Africa, like it has been done elsewhere, then we are in for more trouble. So I will advise that in going forward, we should look at more mitigation issues than looking at adaptation. Well, there are areas that we can, let's say, we can employ those two, let's say, strategies that will mitigate at the same time adapting to issues. Adaptation is very good. Like when we come to Ghana, where we have perennial flooding in some part of our area, it is there. We are faced with it. So we will say that we will have to adapt to that situation by maybe expanding our drains or desilting our drains or doing so, building more drainage system to, let's say, to take care of this issue. But there are areas that we think if we don't have to cut the trees, we don't cut it. Plant more trees. Let us plant the trees so that we reduce precipitations and all those things. Increasing rainfall, which comes to wash away the topsoils and cause erosions and, let's say, displace people and all those things. I think these are issues that we have to deal with it. And I believe that it is time for Africa to take the issue and deal with it to make sure that all these issues that I'm mentioning will not come one day to before us, because we will be the most seriously hit continent if this issue goes on, if our actions goes on, if we continue to let's say slash and burn, we continue to do that attitude that we slash and burn to affect the atmosphere, which at the end of the day coming to affect the weather condition, and we are not able to get enough rains to feed or to water our plants and all those things, then it means we will continue to be importing the $35 billion foodstuff from the Western world, or even as projected, 110 billion. Maybe it can go up. But if you are able to mitigate these issues and put proper measures in place, then we'll be feeding the rest of the world. And like I already said, I think one of our panelists or one of my colleagues didn't agree with me for saying that Africa is the word, is the food basket of the world. He think it's a rhetoric. It's not a rhetoric, okay? Because it's a rhetoric to him because we are seeing Africa as Africans' problem. Well, if you have a land that you have to produce to feed other people, it doesn't become our problem because like the days of Couture Champon and all those operations, feed yourself. People were producing, having their own gardens to produce to feed their families and all those things. We have moved beyond just subsistence farming, just producing to feed your family and that's all. We have moved beyond and going to commercial agriculture. So we have to see agriculture as a business, and seeing agriculture as a business, then our attitude has to be changed. We need to, let's say, balance our actions, how we degrade the environment to make sure that we are able not to, we are not able to destroy the environment, to make sure we produce enough to feed the earth. So I think with the sub-Saharan Africa, people who are in the dry zones and all those, they know their situation already. And as a continent, even when you come to Ghana, I'm using when you go to the up north, where they have harsh conditions, weather hard conditions, even they have only one farming season as compared to the southern sector where we have two farming seasons, the major one and the minor one. In the north, they have one because of the weather condition. Very dry there. So how do we deal with it? Even under this condition, President Akufo-Addo said, why don't you build some, let's say, dams? Okay, dams. I don't know how people will may call it dugout or whatever it is. In as much as it is going to, provide water for them to ensure all year round food production, I have no problem. So we can do more irrigation systems in those dry areas to ensure that they also have all year round food production. So that is the strategy that we have to do more investment in those areas to ensure that they can produce food. Because if the dry areas cannot produce food, how are they going to feed those people up there? We cannot produce from south and take it to the northern part of the country. Okay. So I think that is how we should go about it.
Yes. So thank you very much, Honorable Nyako. Yes, so we have about 20 minutes left, and we are going to go through the rest of the panelists to complete it for the day. So our next question goes to Hannah Graham. So Hannah, we want to see girls and women's involvement in pushing food security on the continent. How do you suggest we do this?
Yeah, we've already seen, through the work that we do with Girl Powered Nutrition, that girls can be advocates for this cause and they actually can engage decision makers in their country. And I'll pass on to Faizo and Valentine in a minute to talk about their work in advocacy projects. But one of the key, things that governments need to do is like urgent action to avoid the long-term and large-scale impact the pandemic will have on our most vulnerable populations. We've actually got some recommendations for that. So things like, taking steps to ensure that everybody has sufficient access to nutritious food, particularly around those in vulnerable groups and those who are now considered vulnerable because of COVID-19. Ensure that nutrition remains a top priority in health systems, applying a gendered lens to that. Transform discriminatory social norms, stereotypes and practices around malnutrition. Disaggregating national data underneath each SDG target to ensure that, age, sex and other categories, bearing in mind the intersecting nature of inequality. Invest in increased understanding of healthy nutrition for girls at all levels. Recognise the intersections and cross-cutting issues that disproportionately affect young women, and obviously take steps to consult young women and girls in forming solutions to policy and practice, which is what I'd like to do now. So yeah, over to you, Valentine and Faizo. What steps do you think girls can take in, sorry, I've forgotten the question. What steps do you think that girls can take in achieving enough affordable, sufficient and nutritious food for themselves and contribute to food security in Africa?
Okay. In my opinion, I think first girls should be educated or people should raise awareness on girls on the importance of good nutrition so that girls can take a step on it. And you know, in bringing changes, we need to start with girls themselves. They need to have like their vegetable gardens and ensure every girl can access like a good nutrition before they start to move to make like big moves like national campaigns and whatever. So I think first girls should be educated on good nutrition and how they can access good nutrition, like planting vegetable gardens in all, like even when you live in a place where there is unfertile soil, there's other alternatives. And also I think that government should prioritize and take in concern the like contribution made by girls and young women in like planning the making policies and planning different programs for girls and young women. And also we girls and young women should take a step on like speaking of what we want and what should be done in the access that we can get good nutrition. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from Fahizoro?
Okay, thank you. I totally agree with Valentine of what she said. Deliver the nutrition education in the nutrition seats in their specific region, share the success story through their experience to the federation and globally, contribute to the online campaign like social media posts, video making, success story, poetry or song, advocacy, but also conduct research about the importance of girls and adolescent nutrition in the development. Also speak out in the relevant event and lead their own campaign on girls and adolescent nutrition. Girls can contribute in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fahizoro. So, still on looking for solutions, return to Dr. Atichogbe. We ask, how can Africa produce the required number of crops to cater for her nutritious needs?
Okay, hello. Thanks for having me. Once again, before I deal with the solution, I would like to say that action now. If we don't take action now on nutrition and food security, we are going to force the vulnerables in Africa to adopt an unhealthy coping strategy to feed themselves, which will only go a long way to exacerbate the already triple burden of malnutrition that Africa is faced with. Stunting and wasting, on the other hand, overweight and obesity, with associated non-communicable diseases in which will affect our immune system, so that we are not going to be able to cope with any pandemic or virus or infection that will come. And now to the solution, I think the best way to go is a strong policy from both government and private sector on agricultural research. I think we should research into soil science. We should pump money into soil science. Let's study what kind of soil Africa is having now into improved seed research, so that the agriculturists will be able to come up with seeds that are high yielding, early maturing, that are drought resistant and pest resistant. I think we should also learn a few things from Israel, the country Israel. They are regions of Africa. And then I learned something from Israel in, they call it drip irrigation, which is a low pressure irrigation. They can harvest rainwater into agriculture farms and then release it during the planting season, so that they have enough water all year round for the farms. Okay, there's also another technology I saw in the Niger Republic. It's called the TASA technique, where they actually dug little holes in the farm, and then a kind of a drench or a small food crops at the surfaces. There is some research that people have conducted, and then they did the TASA technique on one plot, And then with that TESA technique on another, at the end of the day, they harvested about 553 kilogram per hectare of millet on the land that has a TESA technique from the Niger Republic, and the one that does not have only yielded about 11 kilograms of millet. So that means that we already have the techniques that we can develop. So let's put money into research. Let's open the intra-regional trade system so that we can actually mobilize food resources. Let's have the silos. Let's have the warehouse. Let's invest into the post-harvest management of crops after harvesting, so that we have a lot of food available all year round for people to consume, so that we can actually have optimal health and good roof for everybody in Africa, from childhood to adulthood. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atichogbe. Yes, you have given us so many possibilities of making sure that we produce the nutritious food that we require. One thing that you mentioned that stood out was, let's open the intra-regional trade system. And we want to ask Dr. Stoiber, free trade or fair trade, now and in the longer term, which is the way to go for food security? And share your thoughts on whether there's a clear connection between higher food prices and the rise of poverty.
Yeah, thank you, Henry, for these two very difficult questions. To me, of course, if you ask me personally, I would always say fair trade, because I only buy fair trade products, even if they come from Africa, or the coffee, or the tea from Kenya, or so on. But of course, maybe sometimes we feel that fair trade products, or in my country at least, they are a little bit more expensive than the other products. But okay, if I can afford it, I can buy it. But maybe not everybody can afford it. So for me, it is, maybe we have to talk first of all about good trade. The pure free trade anyway actually doesn't exist. Those who advocate for free trade, like we in the EU, European Union, we have we protect our small farmers by giving them high prices in order that the agriculture here survives. And it doesn't mean if our sugar beet farmers in Germany, they could get a nice price for the sugar beets, but honestly speaking, it would be from the environment and from mitigation aspects, what also the minister from Ghana mentioned. It would be much better to eat only the cane sugar from Africa, because it is less greenhouse gas emissions, I think, producing them. So good trade means for me also that a country has a strategy of a diversification of trade outlines, because diversification means risk minimization, and risk minimization is very important for food security. Also there you need to diversify your food on the plate, no? Then you reach the food security, Dr. Patience, you will agree. Huh? And I also think that even let it be a farmer, a country, a municipality, a region, trying to diversify the markets, for example, also including shorter value chains. If a farmer is producing green princess beans in Kenya for the UK, it's nice somehow. But if suddenly in COVID is a lockdown and there is no possibility, and the green beans maybe cannot be exported, so there must be a second livelihood strategy. And small farmers, they are smart. They usually have at least 4 livelihood strategies to survive. And if they grow a plant, they need to have at least 2 minimum uses: to feed for the livestock, and to use it as a fence, or to feed for the family and for the livestock, or whatever. So also including shorter value chains for the regions. The second, I go very much also with the Girls Project, the social upgrading of value chains, the social inclusion of weaker part chain actors in the value chain, also women, and girls, or maybe very small farmers that do not have the opportunity in their networks into the political areas. So they are very far away from where policy is made. So maybe by social upgrading, we can support that. And the last one would be a functional upgrading. And this is particularly for the young generation, also a big potential in Africa. We were told, or we talked about this today. A farmer, for young people to be a farmer is maybe not so attractive. So I think fair trade also includes to give the opportunity to young people to produce not only maize, but maybe a very interesting product made out of maize, yeah, or insect, whatever, new products that are interesting. So these young people can take over functions in the value chain that traditionally are not taken over by farmers, like marketing, social media marketing, like new products, processing, and so on and so on. Food prices and poverty, yeah, this is just, I mean, that is a very long debate. I have to answer it, yeah. But in the past, it was a common wisdom, if there are rising food prices, poverty rises. Yes, because, and this leads to social and political unrest. We had these food riots and so on in the past, and we still have today, and we don't know what is happening. And we still see it today in the townships of Cape Town. People have no access to the supermarkets, and they cannot go to the local shops. So there was a quite, food injustice leads also to unrest. And of course, if I have only spent maybe 10% of my income on food, I don't mind if the bread is a few cents more expensive. But if I'm a poor person and maybe I don't have so many income, and I spend 60% of my income on food or more, of course I will suffer, because even if it's 1 or 2 cents higher, it is difficult for me to. So particularly for countries that import a lot of food and food prices get higher, like for West Africa, Central Africa, but also Mozambique, for example, lots of food is imported. Even staple food is imported in West Africa, like rice. There, I think poverty may rise, especially because more consumers are there who suffer from higher food prices than the producer, who may benefit a little bit from higher food prices. But in the long term, and we have this year, it's a study on chicken in Benin, the EU chicken, the chicken export, the exported chicken or imported chicken in the Benin, and what is the impact on the local food market in the capital of Benin? What is the name? Cotonou. Yeah, yeah. So that will be very interesting, because I mean, people who have not much to buy, maybe they prefer this cheap chicken, but it is not good for the local chicken producers, and that is the question. And there is an evidence now, of course, higher food prices boost the production as well. There are many studies since the local food prices, and it benefits the farmers. But if the production rises, then maybe also consumers should be. The production only rises if the farmers also have the opportunity, if they have seed and what we discussed before, access to credit, to land, and so on. And in the same time, maybe consumers also could form cooperatives, like consumer cooperatives, to say, we do shopping food together, yeah? Like we did in the past, the poor farm workers, here we had in Germany, they just form a group together and say, okay, we don't have much money to buy, so we group ourselves, we have more bargaining power, and then we look where we can buy the maize or what we eat, the potatoes or the wheat, cheaper. So I think it must be smart solutions in this case, and yeah, fair trade is good, and consumer farmer linkages are good, and a rural cooperation is good in order to balance it out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stoiber. That's a very elaborate response. And we want to ask Ms. Mungai, So insufficient investment in the agri sector, coupled with the increasing land grabs for other purposes, is also responsible for the worrisome food security situation. With fast economic development on the African continent, how do you foresee Africa's food security in the next 20 years?
Thank you for that question. And I'll also use this as a chance to conclude all my statements and leave you my final parting points. And what I would say is that Africa is in a position that can either become more or less secure due to this crisis in the next 20 years. As a continent, we can choose to either embrace disruptive policy strategies, or we can choose to continue on the trajectory that we are on, which is an insecure future. And that is why I want to highlight one of my favorite quotes from one of the greatest Pan-African thinkers in my view, who says, "You cannot carry out fundamental change without a certain amount of madness." In this case, it comes from nonconformity, the courage to turn your back on the old formulas, the courage to invent the future. It took the madmen of yesterday for us to be able to act with extreme clarity today. I want to be one of those madmen. We must dare to invent the future. And that was said by Thomas Sankara. And that is why I say that as the people of Africa, and as youth in particular, we must dare to invent a future that is more sustainable in health and food security. And I say this, and I suggest two other policy solutions that we can also think about undertaking. And first of that is to help enhance our economic and food security in the next 20 years is to buy Africa first. Stimulating the African private sector by encouraging African governments to buy what they cannot find at home, e.g. if there's a food shortage in the post the coronavirus, in other African countries before looking abroad. I signpost this because more often than not, I will not name the countries because we know ourselves, whenever we run into a food crisis, we will not buy from our neighbors the rice relief or even the maize relief that we need. We will run to South America or even Europe. But we need to instead foster favorable buying and exporting relationships amongst ourselves to mitigate further food crises whereby we do not exploit ourselves or each other. And secondly, we need to also look into engaging the world as one. While African states do not agree on everything, this crisis will bring us together on various things. One of the most important of those things is debt. Africa needs debt relief to give it the fiscal space to pay for the virus response and the post-crisis stimulus that we will need. Rather than have each African country go to its bilateral and development partner on its own to beg for debt relief or a payment pause, this message would be more powerful if the continent speaks and negotiates with one voice, increasing its bargaining power and the momentum behind the issue. Thus, my parting point is my favorite parable. Until the lion learns to tell his tale, the narrative will always favor the hunter. However, we can choose to utilize this crisis to not only rewrite our tale, but choose whether it will be one of continual lack or whether we will use it to plan and effect for a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mungai. Yes, so our final question goes to Mr. David Afre. Now, Ms. Mungai mentioned that Africa must speak with one voice. Dr. Steiber mentioned that the African farmers must form cooperative unions to further their cause. Now, our question to Mr. Afre is this. If we do not do all these, and Africa should face massive food insecurity, what are the accompanying challenges, or what other challenges will bedevil the continent in the next 10 to 15 years?
Thank you for that question. That will mean that Africa will be moving towards a very dangerous time in its existence as a continent of human beings. But one critical area we will need to look at, I anticipate falling education standards. Where we are now in Africa, everywhere, I'm sure children are already at home, universities are closed down, and you need a lot of data to be able to connect to some online lessons here and there. And that depends on the very individual homes of who is able to get this gadget of computer or tablet, or who is actually in a zone that is able to get strong internet connectivity. And so whether we like it or not, if this persists for some longer time, we're going to have fallen education standards on the continent throughout. And this will virtually lead to increased poverty. And so in the face of all this, then you will expect that in some part of Africa, the land grabbing, or what I would call the land war, will resurface again. And so then it will become an issue of survival. It will become an issue of what you can get to eat and not what you may want to wear. And therefore, we might see pocket of land war at family levels, at community levels, even at country levels if we don't take time. And going forward, we might also see, it's already clear that the youth are not even into farming. And so who are our farmers? In most of the cases where commercial farming is also not being done, most of the people who are already interested in farming are going to be aging. In the next 10 years to come, those who are 50 years in farming will become 60. Those who are 60 are 70. And so aging farming population that is able to probably sustain to some extent the life of the people will also begin to dwindle. And that also means that higher level of malnutrition and so on and so forth that that has already been mentioned will happen. And that also means that the governments of Africa will be saddled with the burden of subsidy of food, or probably on anything that they may have to do to make sure that their people are enjoying basic life, which put their bodies and souls together. And generally, it means that Africa must be ready. We already have poverty. Africa is already a poor continent. The very individuals, human beings living on the continent, are poor people. And so we are likely to have increased poverty. And increased poverty will also mean that reduced lifespan on the people of the continent. Does that also predict possibility of more death in the face of HIV, TB, and malaria that kills a child every 5 minutes on a continent? And so I hope that this list of pocket of land war, expected aging farmers, burden of subsidy on governments, increased poverty and falling education standard will be issues that African Union and our various economic blocs like ECOWAS and that's West African communities of the countries will begin to see how they can open up trade, open up their countries to intertrade and ensure that what we can share, we are able to share and make sure that there's availability of food and there's availability of what essentials that are needed to ensure that we are able to get the best for education for our people. We're able to keep our people a bit above poverty level, and that the government itself is able to control the demand of burden on them. How can we replace the aging farmers? And how can we mitigate the land wars that will likely happen? And so I wish Africa all the best, and many thanks for organizing this platform for us to share our ideas. Thank you so much.
Okay, so wonderful submission, Mr. David Afre. Yes, thank you very much. We thank our panelists for their wonderful submissions. We will now move on to our platform to hear some comments and questions from some of our viewers. So Tuala Simamata said, climate change combined with soil degradation hits most smallhold farmers in Indonesia. Most rice fields along the coastline has been salinized severely, particularly in the dry season. We have a question from Mohamed Denta to Honorable Nyako. So Mohamed Denta asks, food security also involves access. So I'm going to read out the questions, and when we finish, we take turns to answer them. Food security also involves access to food resources, which include ensuring consumers have the purchasing power. What has been the government response to that aspect of the food chain? A question to Honorable Nyako. This is from Mohamed Deda. And then from Daniel Frimpong, he says, I think our political leaders should focus more on agri production because majority of our farmers are producing in small scale. The food they are producing is not much because of lack of funds. So I think our leaders should support the farmers to expand their production and also create storage facilities for the goods they produce. Daniel Frimpong, your view is well taken. And yes, thank you so much, Daniel. We also have another question from Camela Catena. How do we reach out to rural communities in end populations during this pandemic to mitigate hunger issues? This season, we also experienced floods, human displacement, unemployment resulting into chronic hunger. I think I'll give this question to Dr. Steiber. How do we reach out to rural communities and populations during this pandemic to mitigate hunger? This season, we are also going to experience flooding, human displacement, and unemployment, resulting in chronic hunger. So, further questions? Okay. And then this question to Dr. Patience Atichogbe from Tuala Simamata. What is the main problems of food chain supply system in Africa? So this is quite a short one. The main problems of food chain supply. So our panelists will take turns to answer these questions, and if anyone has any response, can come in. So we start. Who is ready? Honorable Nyako, food access.
Yes, I'm here, Henry. Food accessibility is very key because if you have a continent where majority of the people are very poor, they are vulnerable, where they will not be able to afford food when the prices are hiked up or increased, it becomes a problem. And that is during the phase of pandemic. That is exactly what we are seeing. In a situation where a country finds itself in this area, or let's say if a country or a government finds itself in this critical situation, all that government has to do is one, and we are doing in Ghana, as I tell you presently, government have decided to set up a surveillance unit at the Ministry of Agriculture. All that we do is to go to the market to monitor prices of goods in the market, foodstuffs in the market. And per the information that we get, we inform our policy decisions. And what are some of the policy decisions? Policy decisions are some of the policy decisions. Well, how do we even, if food prices are high, and these high food prices is as a result of maybe high, let's say, inputs, farming input by the farmers, or let's say transportation issues. What we have to do, government has to come in is, okay, then let us, if not subsidizing the input for the farmers for, let's say, 50%, maybe we will give it to them at no price. It could be 30, it could be 20, it could be even 10%. So the farmers can produce. These are issues government is looking at it now so that it can inform us. Because we are in a free market world. You cannot go and do price control like we did it in 79. You can't do it. When you have a free market economy, you cannot go and do price control. Government has to come. And one of the issues that we can also do to ensure accessibility of food to the people is government trying to release the stocks it has in the buffer stock, those ones that we have stock in our silos, in our warehouses, and all those things, giving it to the market women to come to the market to sell it. Because government is not looking for profit. Government is providing social services to each people and making sure that the people have access to food to eat. So government can decide to release those food items from the buffer stock, what we have, to the market women to sell. And this one also mitigates reduced prices of food stuff. So Accessibility is very key. Not everybody will be able to have access. The food can be in the market, but people will not be able to access it because their purchasing power is so limited to the extent that they can't even afford it. And these are issues that Africa this one is not limited to Ghana alone. It's issue globally, especially in the African continent. We have to address it. Government have to address it. How do you make sure that the food availability becomes accessibility to the people? And these are issues that we think about. Ghana on our own, we are dealing with it in our own way, making sure that the people will have access to the food that they can also meet the nutritional value that they are looking for as a human beings.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Nyako. So to Dr. Stoiber, how do we reach out to rural communities and populations during this pandemic to mitigate hunger issues? This season, we also experienced flood, human displacement, unemployment, which will result into chronic hunger.
I just put in the chat the device we use now, or the device, I mean the program or the app, which is called Kobo Toolbox. Maybe you know that. Well, you could share it maybe with the participants, Henry. Now I put it in the chat. And I would like to mention how we came to this idea. It was not our idea. You know, when we did this COVID-19 monitoring project from the point of view of a small scale farmer, that was the objective, how it impacts the local food system. The idea came from Cape Town, from an urban farmer. The idea for the digital survey tool came from Indonesia, from our partner there, from a farmer organization that is linked to the Church of Toraja in Sulawesi. That's why we also had now Professor Simamata here in this chat asking a question, because we partner also with people from Indonesia, where it's totally different situation than from Africa. We like this South-South exchange as well. So what we did with the help of this toolbox, we set up a questionnaire. And this questionnaire does not only contain but the quantitative question like, how much do you suffer from COVID on a scale from 1 to 10? Okay, that's nice to know that people suffer. Yeah, and there are differences. But we also put in this questionnaire, in this device, questions that lead to solutions. Meaning, if you can't reach people in this, it is dangerous in this situation, because maybe the politicians who have to decide for you, they are very much alone. So they cannot even hear your voice. So if the people who are most affected by a crisis want to be part of the solution, they need to be included and heard, but not just by asking them how much do you fear, but also what are your solutions? Because I think what David mentioned, David Kwesi Avre, about the leadership, I think leadership is good at political level. We need great leaders, of course, but also at the local, at the community level, at this people are affected level. We also need solutions and leaderships, and this chain should not be broken. So that's why we advocate for research that is not only about groups, about vulnerable groups, but with vulnerable groups, with the girls and so on. I think we heard some good practices today, and we would, well, we how to say, there are so many research projects and, you know, vulnerability assessments about people, but not with people. And I think we reap better harvests if we let the solution develop by the people. But it's challenging. We had the first 4 questionnaire rounds. We had a lot of problems with internet in the African region. We made crowdfunding to provide airtime, the practical issues. No? But then we learned from our Indonesian partner, it's better that we have trained enumerators who phone the farmers and ask the questions, because, and then at the end, in the evening, send it to the upload to the platform, the data platform, because for the farmers, it was really challenging to, you know, yeah, the internet access in the mountains, sometimes not so good. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Stoiber. So our last question goes to Dr. Tichogbe from Tuala Simamata. What is the main problem of food chain supply system in Africa? Any ideas?
Okay, I will share my own opinion on what I think the problems of our food supply system in Africa. And I'm going to start from the production side and end at where it comes to the consumption part. The land tenure system in Africa is actually, because access to land in Africa is quite difficult. People are not able to get larger portion of farm because of, number one, poverty, you know. And so once the person doesn't have a large scale of farm, and the person is a peasant farmer or a small scale farmer, they produce the food. After the production, another problem they face is transportation. Bad road networks come into play here in most of, they produce the food, they are not able to transport it. Those that they're able to transport, the charges that the drivers put on the food before they reach to the market sectors are so high that the farmer who has actually gone for loan to put into that production farm need to make some money and make some living, because they need to pay school fees, they need to pay rent, they need to also feed themselves. If you are producing cereals, you need fish and you need other things to make it a balanced diet. Now, another portion is the storage facilities are not avoid. They are in right to bring it to the market. That is another structure that is not available. Now, the farm input themselves are actually also expensive. They need to be subsidized for the farmers so that when they produce the food, they're able to bring it at a price that people can purchase. And what I also want to say is that in Africa, we don't add values to the food that we produce, you know. So food that are produced like the fruit, the mangoes, the oranges, the banana, instead of, we should research into food processing, food development, so that we can turn this food product into other things that can last for a longer duration. So these are a few things that I think are the headaches or the challenges when it comes to the food supply system. We need to add values to the food we produce so that we can store them for a longer period without them going bad. Then we can have enough food for nutritious use. Thank you. Thank you very much, Henry.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Tichogbe. So we have one last comment from Daniel Frempong. He says that, I think our political leaders should focus more on agri production because majority of our farmers are producing in small scale. The food they are producing is not much because of lack of funds. So I think our leaders should support the farmers to expand their production and also create storage facilities for the goods they produce. Elon Mauli Kwau says there must be innovations in agri, especially in biotechnologies, to ramp up food production in Africa. You can take this to ramp up food production in Africa. So we want to thank our panelists, our speakers, for this wonderful session, enlightening us on the challenges that COVID-19 poses to food security in Africa. And even post-COVID-19, what are the challenges we are going to face as a continent and how the continent needs to tighten its seatbelt for the future. We have heard of some solutions from our panelists, including leadership at political level and the community level, inclusion of youth and women in the food security process. We have also listened to what the monitoring process or program done in Kenya and how governments can monitor the growth, production, and harvesting of food, and even to reaching them to consumers. We have also heard of the land grabs that is occurring in many parts of Africa, raising high sky buildings and other infrastructure while limiting food production or access to land for food production. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where we draw the curtain down to today's seminar. And today's seminar has been one of the numerous in the series by the All Africa Students Union. I want to thank you very much for staying glued to us, and catch you next time on the next All Africa Students Union webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Henry.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye for
Thanks,
giving us.
thanks.